Today we are going to do a demo of the Connect Plus application on an Android phone for a Connect Flex hub. You will notice that there are slight differences between the iPhone application or iOS application versus the Android application. The main difference is that the iPhone has buttons located down along the bottom portion of the screen down here, whereas the Android has a menu at the top left-hand corner where you access the system. This demo is for a multi-system account for a Connect Flex hub. For example, this could be a customer that has a business that arms separately from a house, or a detached garage that are separately from a house. Not all customers will have this setup. However, if you do have this setup, you can change between the systems on an Android phone in the top of the menu under the current system by selecting which system you want to operate and manage. Alternatively, on an iPhone, the location for switching that systems would be in this top section here where it says Test Connect FLX, and there would be a drop-down menu that you can change in there. When you load up the application, you'll be presented with your arming and disarming buttons. You may be familiar with these buttons from a previous alarm system. On most alarm systems, there's a stay and away button. On our system, there is a night button as well. If, for confusion, you would like the night button removed, you can talk to your installer and he can remove that button to have only the two buttons. For the intention of this demo, all three buttons will be discussed. Starting with the two buttons on the outside, the stay and the night buttons. These are buttons that arm when people are located inside of the house. The difference between these buttons is an arming time. The stay button has a 60-second time where you can open and close doors. It's meant to be used when you're leaving the location. It allows you to arm the system after you've exited through a door, protecting somebody inside of the house. That 60 seconds allows you to open and close the door as many times as you would like before the system activates. Whereas the night button has no arming time. It would be used when you are climbing into bed at night. Nobody needs to exit a door, so the system arms immediately with no countdown. When either one of these buttons are used, the stay or the night, they will arm, in general, your perimeter sensors. These would be your doors, your windows, and your glass breaks. However, a technician can make slight variant changes for each customer based upon their needs. For example, you may have a detached garage with a motion detector, and that motion detector can be activated under stay, away, and night mode so that when you're inside of your house, your garage is still protected. But again, in most cases, motion detectors under stay and night are not active. It's best to discuss with your installation technician to find out what options they have done for you. The away button is also going to give you an exit time of 60 seconds. Again, you can open and close the doors as much as you want in the 60 seconds. The door does need to be closed at the end of the 60 seconds for it to arm. With away, the sensors that will be active will be your perimeter, your door contacts, your glass breaks, and your windows. However, it will also activate motion detectors, so if somebody walks around in the house, it will set off immediately. When you press that button, again, it gives you 60 seconds where you can exit through the door, and when the system arms under any one of these modes, you'll be presented simply with the mode that it activated in. In this example, I armed it into night mode, and you're presented with just simply the disarm button. If you set up biometrics or you have password security, it can be enabled so that you have instant disarming either via touching your touchscreen thumbprint or entering in a PIN code or showing your face. To disarm the system, you just simply touch the button and then your fingerprint. In other cases, it may ask you to put your face in front of the camera sensor so it can see your face, and if you have no security set up, it may require you to enter your PIN code, which by default is 1234, and we will go over changing that in the demo near the end of this demo. So that is the arming and disarming buttons. We'll move on to the next section. The next section is the favorites section. It's located under the dashboard as well, on the same screen that you start into. This favorites section allows you to attach items onto the main opening screen for easy accessibility. For example, if you wanted to see if your front door was open at a glance, this could be added onto the favorites section. Or, for example, maybe you want to add the thermostat onto your home screen so that you can adjust your temperature. This can be done by adding it to the favorites. You can select the favorites using the select option if you have not added any yet, located on the main screen just above my finger here. Alternatively, you can use the favorites, which is located at the top right corner of the screen with the 3 lines and the edit pencil. When you select this option, it will go into the spots where you can add favorites. For example, we may want to add the front door, and we may want to add the thermostat for easy viewing and accessibility of the thermostat and checking if the door is open or closed. We simply check mark them and hit done, and it adds the favorites to the list. The next section is the security section. On the iPhone, that will be located at the bottom portion of your screen using the security icon. In the Android, it's in the menu at the top left corner, security. Under the security section, it will take you to everything unless there is something that needs your attention. Everything will show you all of the different zones that you have. This may include door contacts, glass breaks, motion detectors, key fobs, sirens. Anything that is security related will show up under this section. You can also separate it through categories at the top of the screen. And there is an attention heading. Under the attention heading, this will show you anything that needs your attention. For example, if you open up a door and a door is left open, it will show up underneath this attention section. Same thing goes for if you get low batteries or somebody tampers the sensor and doesn't place the cover back on. It will appear under this attention section. You'll also notice not only is it down here in this attention section, but there is a banner that has come up in between the stay away and night buttons and the headings for attention, everything, and others. So what I'm trying to explain here is that anything that needs your attention is going to show up in multiple locations to try and get your attention. So if you had a low battery, you don't necessarily need to come into the security section to see that. You can also see that in the spot where it says all clear, as it will show you in multiple locations things that need your attention. The next section, again located at the bottom of your screen if you're on iOS, or in the menu on the Android, is events. Events is an overview of what goes on in the system. The majority of these events are also sent off to the monitoring station as well. It gives you a log of everything that goes on in the system. For example, if you arm the system with one user code, it will show that user as arming the system. If you use a different user code to disarm the system, it will show that person's name under the log. It will also show things like security events. For example, if you set off an intrusion event, such as a door contact, and the siren is going off, it would list the door contact and perhaps a motion detector if you walked inside of it, all in order that they occur. This list is pulled from a server. It is not located on your phone, and it allows you to go back years on the history. It's not something taking up space on the phone, so it's not a thing to worry about. There's also a trouble heading, and if there's some other troubles, such as a system low panel battery or something, they would also be located in this section. The next section is the device section. This section will only appear if you have automated pieces of equipment that you can control through your security application, such as a deadbolt or a thermostat or a Z-Wave plug. All of our automation works with Z-Wave, so you need to have a Z-Wave compatible device in order to control devices on the system. In this system, we have a deadbolt and we have a thermostat. You can see that the deadbolt can be opened and closed using the little slider located to the right of where it says deadbolt. However, to get to the main settings for the deadbolt, you'll simply click on the deadbolt and it will load a new screen. Again, on an iPhone and an Android, they do look slightly different. On the Android, the Manage User Codes is located down near the bottom, whereas up near the top of the screen on the right hand side, I believe, is where the iPhone has its button. Either way, once you locate the Manage User Code option, this is where you can add in different unlocking codes for your door lock. Simply click on the Manage User Codes, and if a code exists in the system, it will load up and give you the option to change that code by simply clicking on the option and editing it, or you can select delete to delete the code. You can also add more codes by canceling the search for other codes and hitting the plus button located on the screen, in this case on the Android at the bottom right corner. When you click the plus, it allows you to add in a code. You simply type in the code that you want to be able to use to unlock that deadbolt and hit OK. Of course, you will want to test this after you've added it in to confirm that the lock works with the new code. We're going to go back to the thermostat. The thermostat is currently not in a running condition. We have it turned off. You would get arrows up and down when you enable the heat or cool setting for the thermostat. So first we'll start by going into the thermostat by clicking on the little picture or where the thermostat says thermostat. In this screen, it gives you an overview of whether the system is running, whether the fan is running, the humidity, which is located at the top left corner of the little house icon, or the current temperature of the system, which is at the right corner at the top of that icon. In order to switch between heat, cool, and off, there is an option that looks like a snowflake or a flame icon. When you click on that icon, it will allow you to switch between the different modes. In this circumstance, we'll switch it to heat and we'll set the mode. You'll notice a fan icon, which is also at the top of the screen. Clicking on this fan icon allows you to have the fan running constantly at low if you would like, or auto, which only runs when the system kicks in the heat mode. You now have the ability, when you are in the heat or cool setting, to adjust your temperature up or down using the up arrow or the down arrow. You'll also notice now when you go back to the other screen that you do have the option to press the up or down arrow on it to adjust that screen to whatever temperature you would like it to be at. The next section, located again at the top left-hand corner, if you have devices, would be scenes. Again, scenes are used with automated products. For example, you might set up a scene to adjust the temperature of your thermostat when you arm into a way. In order to add a scene, which you can add up to 256 scenes, it's best to click on Add Scene or the plus at the top right corner. When you click that, you will give the scene a name that you will understand for when you look at it again down the road. For this example, we're going to set the thermostat into a temperature when we arm into away. So I'm going to call this away temperature. Once you hit OK, the scene will be created, but it will not be active and it will not have any items in the scene to make it perform any actions. In order to do that, we are going to click on the away temp scene to bring up the different options. You'll notice that there are triggers, conditions, and actions. Triggers are the thing that start the whole process of the scene. For example, this could be a certain time of day, this could be an arming status, or it could be a sensor status. The condition is what needs to be in place for it to continue, and all conditions need to be in place for it to continue. So for example, you may want your system to arm to away and set a temperature, but you only want it to do it at a certain time of day. In that circumstance, you would set the condition of a time of day that you only want it to continue in. And actions are what get carried out when the trigger is triggered and the condition is met, and it continues on to the action, and the action is then carried out. So for our scene of creating an away temperature, when you arm into away, the trigger in this will click on the plus and will locate one called when system is armed or disarmed. So we'll select that. It will give us the option to trigger under one of these modes. In this circumstance, we want it to trigger when we arm into away to set the temperature. In this example, we are not going to use a condition because we don't need to have anything other than it arming into away to set the temperature. And our action, which will click the plus once we go under the action tab, will be to set a heat set point for the thermostat because we are in heat mode. It's important to note that if you have an area that you live in where you have a winter and a summer and you have two different temperatures for cooling and for heating, you will need to make a away one for winter and away one for summer, and you can activate and deactivate them at the change of the season. In this circumstance, this is for a heat mode for a circumstance of a winter condition where we need to heat a house or cool it down. When nobody is in this house, we are going to change the temperature lower to allow the furnace not to kick in and the house to cool down to 20.5. So in this example, the trigger is when we arm into away, it will automatically set the thermostat to 20.5, meaning that it will allow the house to cool down to 20.5 before the system is starting to heat again. We may also want to have a scene which is a disarming status. So when we come into the house, that same scene, or I should say a different scene, will activate the thermostat to start to heat the house. So we'll again click the plus, we will give it a name, disarm temp. When we create the scene again, we'll need to go into this scene and we'll need to modify it. We'll add a trigger. Again, in this condition, we are going to use the when the system is armed or disarmed. In this circumstance, it is when the system is disarmed. We are going to add an action. This action again will be to change the heat set point. And this time we are going to have the house warmed to 22 degrees Celsius when we enter the house and disarm the system. Now we have two scenes created. However, if we look at the main screen, we can see that both of these are inactive. In order for us to activate the scenes, we are simply just going to touch where it says inactive to slide the slider to activate those scenes. Now we have two active scenes on our system. One to turn the temperature down when we arm into a way, and one to turn the temperature up when we disarm the system. This is how you can create scenes, and you can create multiple scenes for different things. Again, you could have a scene to arm the system at a specific time of night. You could also have a scene to disarm the system when the deadbolt door lock has a correctly entered code. These are all different scenes that are definitely active or ability to activate on this system, along with many others. There's not much to go over on groups. However, I'll mention groups in the form of light bulbs. If you had Z-Wave light bulbs, for example, in a living room where you had 4 light bulbs, instead of making a scene that has an action to turn off each one of the light bulbs individually, you could group all of those light bulbs into a group and call them living room lights. And instead of triggering each light bulb individually, you could trigger the group to turn off all at once or turn on all at once. Not much to discuss under groups. The next section is the Manage User section, which on both the iPhone and the Android operating system is located up in the top menu. On the iPhone, it looks like a gear. On the Android, it's the burger menu. And Manage Access. When you come under the Manage Access, if you have multiple systems, you will see those listed under the By System. You also have a heading for By User. These are the different ways that you can look at and manage the access. For example, if you want to check a specific user and see what that user has access to, you can do that by going under the By User heading. However, most things will be done under the By System, such as creating new users. Staying under the By System, we are going to select the system we want to add a user to. Once you're in this section, it will have a new heading at the top: interactive users and panel users. These are the two different types of users. Interactive users are people that can use their phone to arm and disarm, if you make them also a panel user. And panel users are simply users that can go to the screen and arm and disarm at the screen when they come in. So you may create an interactive user for one person, and you will also have to create that same person a panel user. However, if you select just to create a panel user for somebody who you just want to arm and disarm at the touch screen or disarming keypad, then you will just create a panel user. In order to create an interactive user, somebody who can use their phone, we're going to stay under interactive users. We're going to click the plus. The plus will allow you to enter in the name of the person. You will use their email, so if they forget their password, it sends to their email. And you need to have a unique username. So if your name is John Smith, there is a good chance you are not going to get the username John Smith. Maybe you can get John.Smith. Or John.Smith. But the name needs to be unique in the system, and the system is used with multiple different users. So although you may not have selected the username, somebody else might have. Think of it like Gmail or another email product where you need to have a unique username. The password, it should be common sense, but it should be a strong password. Using the suggest option is a very, very strong password and is recommended. However, it's understandable that you may want to use your own password so you can remember it. Again, common sense should tell you that you should use a strong password which has upper and lower case letters, special characters, and numbers. The more you use of the different characters, the stronger the password becomes, and the harder it is for somebody to guess that password and get into the security system. Once you selected a password and you filled out the username and your name and email, if you want the user to help you manage the system, there is an option that says allow this user to manage account users. These users will get heightened privileges, allowing them to help you create new users, delete users, and modify PIN codes. They can only do that for the systems that they have access to. For example, if you have a house and a business and you add them to the business account, this user would only be able to add users onto the business. However, you could give this user access to the business and the house, and they could create users on either one of those systems. And my suggestion is to use the automatic grant user option so it automatically gives the permissions to the people immediately. Once you've filled this out, if you're on an Android phone, you will need to select the validate option before it will allow you to click the add button. On the iPhone, you can save or add. In some circumstances on these screens, it might say save, add, or if you recall what a floppy disk icon looks like, it may be a floppy disk icon for the save. Once you've created an interactive user, you do need to create a panel user so that that interactive user can arm and disarm the system. However, it is worth noting again that if you are just creating a panel user, you do not need to create an interactive user. In this circumstance, we've just created an interactive user, so we'll go to the panel user section to create a user for them. If you are just creating a panel user, you will only go to the panel users and click the plus. When you click the plus, you will enter in the name of the person who will be arming and disarming and a 4-digit PIN code for them to use. The name that you enter here will be the name that shows up under the event log under the arming and disarming. It's suggested that you use a name that you're going to understand when you look at that log so you can see who is arming and disarming at a glance. Once you've entered in the display name and the PIN code, you can save and continue, save or hit the floppy disk icon to save depending on what your phone version shows you. If you have created an interactive user, you will now have to go back to that interactive user, select that user, and link that user to the panel. In this circumstance, I've already linked a user. However, if we wanted to give access to somebody else on this system and link it, we would enable them and we would link that user to the newly created panel user that we created. This will allow them now from their phone to arm and disarm, and if they need to go to the panel, they can also arm and disarm at the panel. And that is user creation.
That concludes this portion of the demo for the Connect Plus application using the FlexHub.